Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. So it's me between you and your train if you're going, or your free drink with British Gas if you're staying. That's no pressure there then. Anyone who deals with renewable energy or anything to do with, thank you, sustainability will know you have a very short space of time to get your point over. People start glazing over, shutters start coming down, swaying on their feet, so I'll hopefully be relatively quick. I'm not in any of my photographs. I realised as Andrew was going through that obviously I should have posed in more of them, but not being an elected member, hey, it doesn't really matter, does it? I was at the Solace conference, the Society of Chief Executives conference last week in Cardiff, and there was a chap there called Steve McCauley, who's a leadership consultant, very impressive, gets up there on the stage, starts talking about leadership, and he said, if you want different outcomes, bigger outcomes, we need to think big. He was talking about the problems with financing and the recession and the comprehensive spending review and all the rest of it. And I sat there in the front row thinking, I can twist this a little in terms of energy and particularly renewable energy. And he was saying what we need wildly ambitious thinking. We need people who don't say there's anything that's impossible. Local authorities that will push things forward and say we're going to do this. And he gave two examples, and one was Google. And hands up if you use Google as a search engine. Lots of people use Google. Google didn't exist 10 years ago. The business plan for Google was to take all the world's information, put it in one place and make it freely available to everybody. It was absolutely barking mad when they came up with it in 2000, and yet here it is now. Another one was Apple. All of your music in your pocket all of the time. In 2002, when they came up with the idea, it was impossible. It didn't exist. And yet it's been made to work. And that's what I think we need in relation to renewables. Wild ambition. Let's go out there. Let's really create something that's memorable. So, a bit about Cornwall, very small bit about Cornwall really. It's a new authority, as I'm sure you all know, created from 6 former districts and a county council, newly elected council, new cabinet and all the rest of it. And one of its priorities is climate change. It's one of its stated priorities. That's a very good start. Then you've got the Green Cornwall programme, different strands to it. You've got the obvious things in there like emissions reduction or low carbon economy. You've got renewable energy, but they also try to make it holistic. There's behaviour change in there. There's the economic side of climate change, looking at it through an economic prism about economic regeneration and jobs and so on. And the idea is to put it all together in a single programme. And I go to local authorities now and they say, we want to do this with PV or we want to put a wind turbine up or whatever. And I say, well, what's your climate change programme? And they're always a bit fuzzy about that. But to me, it's all part of the same thing. It has to all join the dots up and hang together properly. Otherwise, you don't get the maximise the benefits. Cornwall's in a process of change, of course. Despite the fact it's a lovely place, there's still deprivation, other things around, and they really need to move on. This was a chance to shine, if you like. It was a chance to be good at something new and vibrant moving forwards. Just a little bit about the low-carbon economy. Of course, this has all changed from the comprehensive spending review. Those of you who are involved in CRC will know that after 5 years of consulting on this and 5 years of saying it was revenue neutral, the government's now decided they're going to keep all of the money and not recycle any of it. So that's sort of thrown us a little bit, those of you who had plans in this direction. But effectively, this is all about improving the way that you manage energy and your emissions as a result. Of course, the Carbon Trust Standard and AMR were both part of what was called the early action metric. Now, of course, that's all up in the air as well now, because if they don't give you the money back, what value is the early action metric? I haven't really quite got a head around some of this. But of course, there's wider points to be made about both the Carbon Trust Standard and AMR. And those are that they're really linked to intelligent financial control and energy management. And the point, again, going back to your climate change programme, you can't really have a proper programme unless you've got the data. I could come up with 15 questions and say, right, there they are. What's your energy spend? What's the split between oil, gas and electricity? What's your carbon footprint? How's that broken down? And so on. And you've got to know what the answers to those various things are in order to come up with a credible strategy. So it's not just about the CRC, which is always really quite a small part of this. Now, so far as energy usage is concerned, of course, remember there's three ways to get your carbon footprint down. The first is the easiest and the cheapest, and that's to use less energy. Secondly, to improve your energy efficiency, and thirdly, go on to renewables. And it is, in my view, linear. That's the way you should do it. There's no point in putting a solar panel on a roof that's uninsulated, on a house with no cavity wall insulation that leaks heat everywhere, because essentially you're not getting the maximum value from your investment using Mac curve technology and so on. So it's important to get all that sorted. And in Cornwall, this is a relevant slide because we effectively decided we were going to have a challenging target for renewables. And of course, how much you have to generate under a renewable energy strategy depends on how much you actually use. And of course, I thought it was quite ironic, but interesting nonetheless, that one of the best ways to actually get people to focus on how much you used was to come up with a renewable strategy, say that's how much we've got to generate. And then everyone started going, we use a lot of energy, don't we? You know, and that was a really good start to actually say, well, all right, maybe we ought to look at how much we're using and see if we can get that down. Plugged in places is about electric cars. The reason we wanted to do that was because Cornwall does 20 million miles a year just going to meetings. That's 20 million miles, 500 times around the world, in cars polluting Cornwall. Not really that good, is it, when you think about it? If we can get some electric cars at 1p or 2p a mile, notwithstanding the carbon saving, we'll be on a very good trajectory. And again, it's this idea of bringing all the dots into play and joining them all up. So it's not about just one thing, it's about the whole thing working together. So I've cantered through those a little to get onto this bit. This is the renewable energy bit, of course, and the target that they chose in Cornwall was to be energy self-sufficient by 2025. That sort of rolls off the tongue pretty easy, that, doesn't it? Energy self-sufficient by 2025. That's within 15 years, they're going to make all the energy that they need to operate. That's 140,000 megawatt hours per annum, or roughly 8 to 10 million pounds worth of electricity, gas or oil currently being used. So I'm not sure they fully understood that target when they actually accepted it, but either way, as I said, let's think big, and you don't get much bigger than that, do you? So we've got 15 years in a programme. Well, from the time the council was appointed a year ago, it's 16 years actually. It's all out elections in Cornwall, so just by pure chance, you can split it into 4 sections, because as you know, any consultant can explain anything using a 4-quadrant chart. And helpfully, at the end of each of those 4-year sections, there's an election. So the new council comes in and can decide if it's still a priority, how they want to do it, and so on. So we put together this ambitious programme, and the idea was the first quadrant would be solar energy, roughly 30 megawatts. Second quadrant would be wind, again, roughly 30 megawatts. And into the third and fourth quadrants would be into heat networks and so on. And the idea of doing it that way was we took the 140,000 megawatts into a pie chart, roughly half electricity, half gas, start attacking the electricity first, half the electricity used up with solar, the other half used up with wind, and then you start with the electricity, of course, because that's got the higher carbon footprint, and then the heat networks start attacking the gas usage, and if it all goes to plan, by 2025 you will not rely on those facilities and will have all your own in place. How much does it cost? I hear you ask, between 150 and 200 million pounds. Had a meeting with the chief exec and the director of finance. He fell off the chair at this point and had to be, smelling salts had to be administered. But ultimately, when you think about it, we've heard all about this today, the point is this, isn't it? It's not about the debt, it's about the income stream that supports the debt. So the way I tried to explain it was, it's like having a flat that you own, a buy-to-let flat, where you've got a 25-year repayment mortgage. You've got a guaranteed tenant for 25 years, and the rent is more than the mortgage. It doesn't matter if you earn 25,000 a year and you have £1 million worth of property, because the debt on the property is serviced, and that's the only thing that really counts. So if you did that, you'd have 150 to 200 million pounds worth of assets. It's probably worth more than that anyway, and that's going to be supported by 25-30 million pounds income stream. Now, if you've got a budget of 1.4 billion pounds per annum in revenue terms and over 500 million in capital expenditure, it's not that big then. You start thinking of big thinking, okay, there's some big figures there, but it's not actually as ambitious as it might actually appear.